January 29th, 1979 started like any other Monday morning in San Diego, California. Children laughed outside Grover Cleveland Elementary School, waiting for their class to begin. Parents dropped off their kids, and teachers prepared lessons. Nothing seemed unusual. But then, the gunfire started. From a house directly across the street, a 16-year-old girl leaned out the window with a semi-automatic rifle and began firing on a crowd of elementary school students. Students dove to the ground. Teachers screamed for cover. Blood covered the sidewalks outside the school. By the time the shooting had ended, 2 adults were dead, 8 children were wounded, and America had witnessed one of the first modern school shootings in its history. When police finally asked the teenage shooter why she did it, her response to the entire world was, "I don't like Mondays. This livens up the day." Today, we're diving into the horrifying case of Brenda Spencer, a troubled teenager behind the Cleveland Elementary School shooting. We'll explore her disturbing childhood, the allegations of abuse and neglect, and warning signs everyone missed. The victims whose lives were shattered, the investigation, the trial, and the haunting legacy that this case left behind. Because this wasn't a random act of violence. It was a tragedy decades ahead of its time. This is Bloodstained Backstories, and this is the story of Brenda Spencer. Brenda Ann Spencer was born on April 3rd, 1962, to Dorothy Nadine Spencer and Wallace Edward Spencer. She was the youngest of 3 children. Her parents married in 1954, but the relationship reportedly became unstable over time. In 1972, Brenda's mother Dorothy discovered Wallace had been cheating on her with multiple women and filed for divorce. After the divorce, Brenda remained living with her father in San Diego, California. According to later reports and testimony given during parole hearings, Brenda and her father allegedly lived in severe poverty inside a small rundown house across from the Grover Cleveland Elementary School. The house was reportedly cluttered with empty alcohol bottles, and Brenda later claimed that she and her father slept together on a single mattress on the living room floor. Brenda would later accuse her father of sexually abusing and physically abusing her throughout her childhood, although Wallace Spencer would deny these allegations. At the time of the shooting, Brenda was only 16 years old. She stood around 5'2" with bright red hair, a look many witnesses would later remember from television coverage of the massacre. People who knew Brenda described her as angry, withdrawn, depressed, and deeply troubled. Some classmates openly admitted they were afraid of her, and others would describe her as crazy. Brenda herself referred to herself as radical. She reportedly had a deep hatred towards police officers, often calling them pigs. Acquaintances later claimed she became excited whenever news reports mentioned officers being killed and frequently talked to about wanting to shoot police. Some people who knew Brenda even recalled her saying she wanted to do something, quote unquote, big so she could end up on television one day. Most people her age want to do something big and go acting, not murder. Looking back at the shooting, those statements became deeply disturbing warning signs. Brenda struggled heavily in school and showed very little interest in academics. One former teacher later recalled having to ask Brenda if she was awake during class because she appeared so disconnected and uninterested. Despite this, Brenda did show talent in certain areas. She enjoyed photography and even won first place in the Humane Society photography competition. But by her teenage years, her emotional instability was becoming increasingly obvious. She abused alcohol and drugs at a young age. She would skip school frequently, and she had been arrested for burglary and vandalism. During the summer of 1978, Brenda was arrested for allegedly shooting out windows at the elementary school across her house with a BB gun. Although some reports later disputed whether the BB gun was actually used, the vandalism incident still placed her on law enforcement's radar months before the massacre. The same year, Brenda was referred to a facility for troubled students because of her chronic truancy. Staff members reportedly warned her parents that Brenda was suicidal. Just months before the shooting, Brenda underwent a psychotic evaluation arranged by her probation officer. Mental health professionals concluded she was suffering from severe depression and recommended she be admitted to a mental hospital for treatment. Her father refused. Years later, many people would look back at the moment and wonder if the tragedy could have been prevented. While being evaluated after her arrest, doctors discovered Brenda had damage to one of her temporal lobes caused from a previous bicycle accident. Some experts believe the brain injury may have contributed to the impulsive behaviors and emotional instability. But despite all these warning signs of depression, violence, suicidal thoughts, criminal behavior, substance abuse, and psychological concerns, no major intervention occurred. We see this time and time again. The system fails. Early signs overlooked. Tragedies that could have prevented. But due to the constraints of law enforcement and the available resources, things are always overlooked until it's too late. Then came Christmas of 1978. Despite being told by mental health professionals that his daughter was severely depressed and potentially suicidal, Wallace Spencer bought Brenda a Ruger 10-22 semi-automatic rifle equipped with a telescopic sight, along with approximately 500 rounds of ammunition. Yeah, that seems like a great idea for your suicidal daughter. Brenda later said, "I asked for a radio and I got a rifle." When asked why she believed her father gave her the weapon, she chillingly reported, "He got me the rifle so I would kill myself." Whether literal or symbolic, the statement painted a horrifying picture of Brenda's home life. And decades later, people still ask the same question. Why would a father give a troubled 16-year-old girl with severe depression a semi-automatic rifle and hundreds of rounds of ammunition? In the weeks leading up to the attack, Brenda reportedly practiced shooting from outside the window of their home, and no one stopped her. Go figure. On the morning of Monday, January 29, 1979, as children were gathering outside Grover Cleveland Elementary School, waiting for Principal Burton Ragg to unlock the gates, across the street, Brenda Spencer sat inside her house, armed with her rifle. At approximately 8:30 in the morning, she opened fire. According to reports, the first child Brenda targeted was 9-year-old Cam Miller because he was wearing her favorite color, blue. Panic exploded across the school ground. Children screamed and ran for cover while their teachers desperately threw students to the ground trying to shield them from bullets. Brenda fired repeatedly into the crowd from the window overlooking the school entrance. Principal Burton Ragg and teacher Daryl Barnes attempted to help children get to safety during the attack. Principal Ragg was shot and killed. Moments later, custodian Mike Schuchar came outside attempting to pull children to safety. He was also fatally shot. In total, Brenda wounded 8 children. Officer Robert Robb, a 28-year-old responding police officer, was shot in the neck shortly after arriving at the scene. Investigators later determined Brenda fired approximately 36 rounds during the attack. The situation could have been even worse if not for the quick action of the police officers who maneuvered a garbage truck between Brenda's home and the school, obstructing her line of sight and limiting her ability to continue firing at children. The shooting lasted around 20 minutes before Brenda barricaded herself inside the house. After the shooting stopped and Brenda was locked inside the home for several hours with police surrounding her, negotiators attempted to speak with her by phone. During the standoff, a reporter from the San Diego Evening Tribune randomly called phone numbers in the neighborhood hoping to reach someone connected to the situation. Unexpectedly, Brenda answered the phone herself. The reporter asked her why she opened fire in the school, and Brenda calmly replied, "I don't like Mondays. This livens the day up." This statement immediately became one of the most infamous quotes in criminal history. But that wasn't the only disturbing thing she said. According to negotiators, Brenda also referred to the children and the adults outside the school as easy targets. At one point, reportedly warned police that she was planning to come out of the house shooting. Inside the home, investigators would later find a Ruger rifle, ammunition, beer bottles, and evidence Brenda had been drinking before the attack. Authorities discovered no political motive, gang connection, or personal connection to the victims. The horrifying attack appeared random. Eventually, after hours of negotiations and reportedly after being promised a Burger King meal, Brenda surrendered peacefully. The evidence against Brenda Spencer was overwhelming. Police recovered the Ruger rifle used in the shooting, spent shell casings matching the weapon, ammunition found in the home, witness testimony placing Brenda at the window, her own admission during the negotiations, and recorded phone conversations. There was never any serious doubt about who committed the shootings. The larger question, though, was why. Investigators uncovered Brenda's long history of depression, violence, substance abuse, truancy, criminal behavior, and family dysfunction. Psychological evaluations painted a picture of an isolated and emotionally disturbed teenager who had become increasingly disconnected from empathy and reality. Prosecutors argued that despite her troubled upbringing, Brenda fully understood her action. She aimed deliberately. She reloaded repeatedly. She targeted fleeing victims. To prosecutors, that showed clear intent to kill. Because Brenda was only 16 years old at the time of the shooting, the case immediately sparked debate over whether she should be tried as a juvenile or as an adult. Ultimately, prosecutors charged her as an adult. Brenda would eventually plead guilty to 2 counts of murder and assault with a deadly weapon. 9 counts of attempted murder were dismissed as part of the plea agreement. On April 4th, 1980, one day after her 18th birthday, Brenda Spencer was sentenced to concurrent terms of 25 years to life in prison. During court proceedings, Brenda showed very little emotion publicly. Her defense pointed to severe depressions, alleged abuse, substance abuse, neurological issues, and her dysfunctional home environment. But the brutality of the crime overshadowed everything else. While incarcerated, Brenda was diagnosed with epilepsy and received medication for both seizures and depression. She reportedly worked repairing electronic equipment during her time in prison. Brenda first became eligible for parole in 1993. At that hearing, she claimed she hoped police would kill her during the shooting. She also blamed alcohol and drugs for her actions, although toxicology reports performed at her arrest reportedly came back as negative. Over the years, Brenda gave conflicting explanations for why she committed the attack. At a later parole hearing, she blamed depression, alcohol and drugs, child neglect, abuse from her father, suicidal thoughts, and boredom. In 2001, Brenda publicly claimed for the first time that her father had sexually abused her and beaten her throughout her childhood. Wallace Spencer denied those allegations, and the parole board officials questioned why Brenda had never mentioned the abuse previously. At a 2005 parole hearing, reports surfaced claiming Brenda had carved the words courage and pride into her own skin. Brenda corrected them, saying the actual words were unforgiving and alone. The district attorney also referenced prior self-harm incidences as evidence that Brenda remained psychologically unstable and unsuitable for release. The parole board has repeatedly denied her release in 1993, 2001, 2005, 2009, 2022, and again in February 2025. Her next parole hearing is expected in 2028. Today, Brenda remains incarcerated at the California Institute for Women. One bizarre and disturbing detail emerged after Brenda's conviction. One of Brenda's cellmates, a 17-year-old girl, later moved in with Brenda's father, Wallace Spencer. The two eventually married in 1980 and had a daughter together before divorcing. Wallace Spencer would die in February of 2016. The Cleveland Elementary School shooting is often described as the first modern high-profile school shooting in the United States and possibly the earliest recorded elementary shooting in American history. Sadly, it will not be the last. This case forced conversations about youth violence, mental health, guns access, school safety, childhood trauma, and neglect on the inside. Conversations that happen after every school shooting, and unfortunately, not enough is done to stop them. The phrase, "I don't like Mondays," became permanently linked to the crime and later inspired the song, "I Don't Like Mondays" by the Boomtown Rats. Looking back today, the Brenda Spencer case feels terrifyingly familiar. A deeply troubled teenager, ignored warning signs, access to firearms, mental illness, isolation, and violence directed at a school. Themes that repeat again and again through American history with violent school shooters. The story of Brenda Spencer is horrifyingly not only of the violence itself, but because of so many warning signs that appeared and had been long overlooked. It's a case filled with tragedy at every level. The innocent victims who lost their lives, the children traumatized forever, the mentally disturbed teenager failed by nearly every adult around her, and society that, at that time, barely understood how to even respond to school violence. None of Brenda Spencer's sufferings excuses what she did, but understanding the environment that shaped her may help explain something so terrible becoming possible. And that's what makes this case linger in people's minds decades later, because it forces us to ask uncomfortable questions about abuse, neglect, mental illness, responsibility, and whether tragedies like this can be prevented. Thank you for listening to Bloodstained Backstories. If you found this episode compelling, make sure to follow and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And if you'd like to show support, be sure to share this case with friends. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember that every story has consequences long after the headlines fade.